Admiral James Corrigan had spent 22 years in the United States Navy, the last 4 of which he had served as a 2-star rear admiral. He was a man forged in the crucible of special operations, a former SEAL himself who had climbed the ranks through sheer grit, tactical genius, and an unyielding commitment to the teams. He was used to being in charge, used to the immediate respect his rank commanded, and used to the sterile, controlled environment of the Naval Amphibious Base in Coronado. So, when he was ordered to accompany a joint patrol with a newly formed Allied nations coastal defense unit in the South China Sea, he hadn't exactly been thrilled. It was a diplomatic mission, a dog and pony show to show solidarity and assess the capabilities of their partners. For a man of action like Corrigan, it felt like a vacation he never asked for. The Allied unit was a mixed bag. They were eager, well-meaning, but to Corrigan's seasoned eye, or they lacked the hard edge of his own troops. They were led by a Commander Reyes, a competent but nervous officer who seemed perpetually aware he was hosting an American admiral. The patrol itself was standard, a swift boat ride through the emerald channels between limestone karsts that jutted from the sea like ancient giants. The sun was brutal, the air thick with humidity, and the only sound was the drone of the engine and the lapping of water against the hull. It was on the second day that the Admiral decided to lighten the mood. He believed in leading by example, and a little well-intentioned ribbing could often break the ice and build camaraderie. He noticed one of the Allied soldiers, a young woman who kept to herself at the bow of the boat. She was small, lean, with dark eyes that constantly scanned the horizon. While the other soldiers chatted or cleaned their weapons, she was silent, her posture rigid with a watchfulness that was almost eerie. Then her name tape read Santos. Corrigan, standing near the helm with Commander Reyes, nodded in her direction. "Reyes, what's your comms officer doing up there playing lookout?" he asked, a wry smile on his face. "She looks more like a radar dish than a soldier. Afraid a seagull's going to file a flight plan?" Commander Reyes chuckled nervously. "Specialist Santos is very thorough, Admiral. She volunteers for bow watch often." "Thorough," Corrigan repeated, his voice carrying in the wind. "She's wound tighter than a $2 watch. Relaxing isn't a sign of weakness, son. Or in her case, young lady, she needs to learn to smile. We're not exactly expecting a fleet of hostile destroyers out here." He projected his voice, a habit from years of commanding decks. "Specialist Santos, take a break from scanning for mermaids and come join the conversation. Tell me, what's your official role in this unit? Making sure the coffee doesn't get seasick?" A few of the Allied soldiers stiffened, unsure how to react to their distinguished guest teasing one of their own. Specialist Santos turned slowly. Her face was impassive, not a flicker of annoyance or embarrassment crossing her features. She simply looked at the Admiral, her gaze flat and calm, and then, without a word, she stood up. She moved with an economy of motion that was purely functional. She walked towards the Admiral, that her boots silent on the metal deck. As she got closer, she reached for the collar of her uniform blouse. The day was hot, and like many of the soldiers, she had it unbuttoned at the top. She didn't say a word. She simply unbuttoned the next 2 buttons and pulled the fabric aside, revealing the defined curve of her shoulder and the part of her upper back that was usually hidden. There, etched into her sun-kissed skin, was a tattoo. It was a small, immaculate design, so precise it looked almost printed. It was a black ink rendering of a classic World War II-era sniper's scope, the crosshairs perfectly centered. And below it, in a simple, elegant script, were 2 words: "One shot." The world seemed to silence itself for Admiral James Corrigan. The drone of the boat's engine faded into a dull hum. The laughter of the men on deck was suddenly a distant, irrelevant noise. His eyes locked onto that tattoo, and a chill, completely at odds with the tropical heat, ran down his spine. He knew that tattoo. Not the design itself, but its meaning. In the shadowy world of spec ops, tattoos weren't just decorations, they were resumes. They were silent testimonies to skill, to accomplishment, to a specific deadly brotherhood. The one-shot script, the vintage scope. It was the unofficial mark of a very specific and very small community, naval special warfare snipers who had achieved a perfect one-shot kill in combat. But it wasn't just any sniper. And the design was an heirloom, passed down through generations of the most elite. He had last seen it on the arm of a legendary SEAL sniper 20 years ago in Iraq. His mind reeled back. Fallujah, 2004, the hottest, most hellish months of his life. He had been a young lieutenant, leading a platoon. They had been pinned down in a marketplace, insurgents on every rooftop. They were taking heavy fire, and his corpsman was down. They were minutes from being overrun. Then, the shooting from the east flank just stopped. One moment, a hail of AK fire was chewing up the wall next to his head. The next, silence. They later found the insurgent sniper who had been pinning them down. He was a Chechen fighter, a known killer with over 40 confirmed kills. He had been found in his nest, a single perfect bullet hole in his forehead. His own rifle was still aimed, unfired. The shot had been taken from over 1,000 yards away, through a dust-choked wind. It was a shot that defied physics. The sniper who made it was a ghost, a whisper in the comms who only identified himself as Watchman. No one knew his real name. He wasn't part of any official team. He was a rumored asset, a lone operator whose existence was denied by every level of command. Corrigan had never forgotten that impossible shot, the shot that had saved his life and the lives of his men. He looked from the tattoo on Specialist Santos's shoulder up to her face. And her dark eyes were still calm, still flat. She wasn't showing off, she wasn't trying to intimidate him. She was simply answering his question. He had asked about her position. She was showing him her resume. Corrigan's face, usually a mask of stoic command, went pale. He took a half-step back, his hand instinctively going to the rail to steady himself. "Watchman," he breathed, the word escaping his lips before he could stop it. It wasn't a question. It was a recognition. And a flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, crossed Specialist Santos's face, just for a fraction of a second. She gave the smallest of nods, a gesture so subtle that anyone not watching for it would have missed it entirely. She then rebuttoned her blouse, covering the tattoo, and walked back to her post at the bow. She didn't look back. The silence on the boat was absolute. Commander Reyes looked from the Admiral to Specialist Santos, his mouth agape. The other soldiers stared, bewildered. Admiral Corrigan just stood there, gripping the rail, his knuckles white. The jokes about coffee and mermaids were a bitter taste in his mouth. He hadn't been teasing a comms officer. He had just made a joke to a living legend, a ghost from his past who had apparently decided to take a break from the relentless shadows of the American special ops world to serve as a lowly specialist in an allied nation's coastal patrol. Why? The question hammered in his brain. What was she doing here? The rest of the patrol was conducted in a stunned, awkward quiet. The Admiral didn't speak again until they were back at the dock. As Specialist Santos stepped off the boat, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, Corrigan approached her. The easy confidence was gone. In its place was a profound respect. "Specialist Santos," he said, his voice low, stripped of all rank and pretense. "I owe you an apology and a debt from a long time ago in Fallujah." She stopped and looked at him. For the first time, a small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her mouth. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who kept a secret, of someone who had seen too much. "The Admiral doesn't owe me anything," she said, her voice soft with an accent he couldn't quite place. "I was just doing my job. Then, And now? She turned to leave, then paused. But if I could offer some advice, sir? The next time you see a soldier scanning the horizon on bow watch, maybe just let them do their job. You never know what they're looking for. She gave him one last, long look, then walked away, disappearing into the throng of personnel on the base, a ghost returning to the mist. Admiral Corrigan stood there for a long time, the tropical sun beating down on his uniform. He thought about the stories he would never hear, the missions she would never speak of, the weight of that one, perfect shot that had echoed through the decades. He had come on a routine diplomatic mission and had stumbled upon a mystery. He had found the legend of the Watchman, and he had learned the most important lesson of his entire career. Rank and a uniform can tell you a person's position, but they will never ever tell you their story. And sometimes, the most dangerous person on the boat is the quiet one at the front, just watching.